Hey guys, it's Phil coming at you with another video, and I'm sorry I'm a little late, but I've been kind of busy doing a lot of things. I stayed like an hour after on the study group last night, so those that stayed and chatted, thanks again. And as always, thank you guys so much for the support that you guys provide, whether it's the tutoring or attending my study groups or just message me on Facebook or emailing me about questions that you guys have about the exam. It's super wild to see how much people actually want to pick my brain about things. And before I get into anything, I just want to congratulate 4 people that I tutored as well as they joined my study group in passing this week. So that's pretty cool. And that is Patricia, Emily, Jalen, and Kamisha. So that's super awesome to see people actually passing. So that's awesome. So let's get into this video now. So I do offer private tutoring, so reach out to me, send me an email at the Gmail on the screen, as well as my next study group will be on test taking strategies that I utilize, the SFAREAFI, and then we will also be doing question identification and analysis, and that will be next Sunday, November 18th. At 7 p.m. Eastern. Just send me an email, or if you attended my previous ones, just send payment for that, and then we can get you added into the group. And yeah, so let's get into this thing, guys. So a social worker at a private clinic has been working with a 26-year-old female who engages in services due to conflicts at work with her colleagues. The woman reports feeling inferior at work and that she has been coping by visiting her parents' home more to receive comfort from them. What is most likely reasoning for the client's current behavior? So we always want to remember to keep in mind the setting. So we're at a private clinic here. Who's our client? It's a 26-year-old female. And why are they coming to us? Due to conflicts at work with colleagues. So there's some conflictual stuff. The woman reports feeling inferior. So some of the symptoms she's presenting with is the inferiority. And then she's been coping by going back home. So when looking at this question, we're going to say it's a recall because it's asking for more of a specific type answer. And so we have repression, regression, acting out, and sublimation. So here we would need to kind of know the terms. So repression is when someone will ignore situations because the event is too painful for them to process. And then regression, when someone returns to earlier developmental type behaviors. And acting out is when someone will perform behaviors / activities and activities and ignore emotions / do not acknowledge them. Sublimation is when someone will substitute a positive behavior in place of a negative one. And the key thing to utilize when it's sublimation is to sub, and that's substituting something. Acting is where we would have an action in place of something else. Word regress means to go back to. And the word repress, meaning we are pressing something inward. So with this current situation, we're looking at somebody that has been coping by visiting their parents' home. So that is going to be the driving sentence here. So sublimation would not be the correct answer because no one is really substituting any behaviors in place of something else. In this situation, we're actually adding the behavior into our situation. Acting out here would be incorrect because yes, she is performing an action or behavior. However, it's not ignoring the emotional reaction. It's actually promoting emotional expression and reaction. So that leaves us to the two similar ones, repression and regression. And she's not really ignoring the situation because it's too painful. She does believe it's very, very painful and she's seeking comfort for it. However, it'd be regression here because she's doing type behavior that you would see in earlier developmental stages of when your discomfort, you go back to a parental figure for some type of coping and or soothing. And that's looking at a good old defense mechanism by Freud. And let's look into the next one. So a social worker at an outpatient clinic is working with a family and their 15-year-old son who has been skipping school and that they recently caught having sex with one of his peers in their home. The 15-year-old son does not see any issues with his behavior and believes his parents are overreacting and need to loosen up. What psychosexual stage of development best describes the boy's behavior? Alright, so we're a social worker at an outpatient clinic and we're working with a family and a 15-year-old son. And the question is describing more of the son, so that will probably be the primary client. And they've been skipping school and recently caught having sex with one of his peers in the home. So that's the symptomology we're looking at. So the son doesn't see any issues with the behavior, so typical adolescent type behavior, and believes the parents are overreacting and need to loosen up. So we're looking at the psychosexual stage. So again, we're alluding back to some Freudian type theory. So again, we're going to be looking at a recall because it's more pertinent to the particular theory and we need to know the kind of the specifics or kind of navigate the question. So the oral stage, if we know the ages, is 0 to 1 years old. The latent stage is 6 to puberty. Phallic stage is where we're looking at 3 to 6 years old. And then the genital stage, this is where we're looking at puberty to death. So that's the very last stage. However, in these developmental stages, you kind of want to be weary of what age the person is because they could developmentally be a younger age than their actual physical age. So that's where you kind of need to know the characteristics of the concepts as well. Good thing we know this, guys. So the oral stage is where a client is going to be more fixated and get pleasure from their mouth, and then this is typically seen in children that are breastfeeding and just doing it type survival. So the child isn't exhibiting any of that, as well as they don't fall within that age category. And the latent stage is where the client kind of suppresses their sexual urges to start getting some type of social reaction and interaction with other people, to start building relationships and get interest in peer groups together. So in this question, we're looking at a teen that is outwardly expressing their sexual urges and acting on them. So that would be incorrect here, as well as they fall within the puberty range, but that is not what they're looking at in this question. So phallic stage doesn't involve some sexual type urges. However, this is about the child first discovering their private part, and it typically is seen different for males and females. Males start viewing their father as kind of like a competitor for the mother's attention, and thus start having adverse reactions towards father. And then the female starts to want to have a relationship with father, but notices that she's different in that realm, and then starts clinging to the mother and playing with baby dolls to kind of cope with that. So they do involve sexual urges. However, that is not what we're seeing here with this 15-year-old. And thus, the genital stage is where the person unleashes the suppressed sexual urges that they had during the latent stage and start exploring and get into sexual relationships with their peers to start exploring. So that is the correct answer here. And the easy way to remember that the sexual urges are now being released is genital or genitalia. Thus, they are going to start using their genitalia. So that is how we would answer that question. So the next question, a 45-year-old client is attending an intake assessment with a social worker at a community health clinic. The client reports that he finds it difficult to control his impulses, which has resulted in him stealing and getting into frequent fights with friends. Which personality style is the client most likely aligned with? So we always need to know who we're looking at. So we're a 45-year-old client in this one. The social worker is doing an intake assessment, and our setting is a community health clinic. The client is reporting difficulties with impulse and that he's getting into fights. And then the personality style, again, right up the alley of our friend Freud. So we're looking at another recall. However, the breakdown in recalls is just as efficient as in the other questions. So with that, we look at id, ego, superego, or ego ideal. So here, the id, an easy way to remember this is impulsive decisions, because this part of the mind deals all on pleasure center, and impulsive decisions are made, and thus not a lot of cognitive processing goes into getting that. Ego, an easy way to remember this one is evaluate and go, and this is the thought process of the personality styles. So if you have ever seen the cartoons with like the human, and then there's a devil, and then an angel on the shoulder, the id is going to be like the devil character, and the ego is going to be human character, and then superego, an easy way to remember this is superhero, meaning this is the angel character. So this one is trying to infuse ideas that would help the overall societies, and that is what gets it kind of cut in between all of it. And then ego ideal is a part of the ego, and with that we want to take out the ego ideal as well as the ego in general, because here we're dealing with impulses and stealing in fights. So that would take out the the rational and decision making, as well as the part of the rational and decision making. So the impulsive decisions would beg the question of, like, is it bringing a negative or positive result to the person involved? So somebody could be getting into fights because they're trying to defend someone, or they could be getting into fights because it's more of impulsive. So the word, like, impulses here is going to definitely lead us to the id, or the impulsive decision making part. So thus we would rule out the superego and come in with that. So that is the end of the recall style questions. So let's move this down, and then this is where we need to introduce the actual box. So with that, we need to get ready to put our decision making caps on. So a social worker at a family agency is working with adolescents who are struggling with substance use disorders. The adolescents have been attending individual therapy for 6 months and have not shown any improvements. The social worker would like to evaluate her agency's substance use program. What would be the first thing they would need to do? So we're looking at a family agency. Adolescents who have substance use disorders are our target pop. They've been attending. There's no progress. So we're doing a program evaluation. However, my biggest suggestion is to start viewing programs the same way as you do clients, because they are a client, they are just a bigger scaled client. And since we're looking at a first here, always remember first type questions have a high likelihood of being application or a hybrid application reasoning. But since we are looking at a client situation and need to apply our knowledge to it, that is what makes it an application, guys. So speak with some of the adolescents in session to obtain their perspective of the program. So that is where we would mark this as a feelings, because the feelings category is where you're trying to get the client's subjective view of their situation, whether that's you're recognizing their feelings, you're validating their feelings, inquiring about their perspective, or anything along those lines. Identify the resources available to help change the program. Here, since we're identifying or trying to gather something or get more information that is clinical style, we're looking at the assess type category, because anything that involves that is an assess. Implement additional individual as well as group therapy sessions to help improve results. Since the social worker themselves are actually doing an action and furthering the process from an action, this is where we're going to be looking at an intervene. So reach out to the two social workers at another agency to see how they are conducting their substance use program. So again, we're looking at an action, so we're reaching out. So that would be intervene, and then implement, which is an action. So we link that to an intervene. Identify is an action. However, it's kind of more of a clinical observation type action. So we're assessing, and then to obtain their perspective is the key thing to gather in the feelings category. So with that, if we follow our chain of command or acronym here, reaching out would not be the first thing we'd want to do, because reaching out would eventually help us, but it's not going to help us evaluate our specific substance use program. Implement additional individual and group therapies. Yes, that may be helpful, maybe a solution we come up with after we're done evaluating the program, but again, intervene is at the very bottom of the acronym, so we just want to kick that right out. So then we have speak with adolescents, as well as identify the resources available. So assess is below feelings here. And in program evaluation, that's not the first thing that we'd want to do. So here, applying the acronym as well as having knowledge of program evaluation, the feelings or gathering information about the program we're evaluating is the first thing that we would do. So that is how you apply the acronym there. Again, it's not applicable to every question. However, application questions, if they aren't a specific niche like ethics or group processes or anything like that, then we can apply the acronym. So when you think it's an application, try to apply the acronym. If you're unable to, then chances are we're looking at a different question than we think we are. So that leads us to the next question. So a social worker at a community health clinic is completing an intake with a father and his 2 children. The father reports that the home they are currently living in has mold, and more recently him and his 2 children have been coughing and feeling sick. The father does not have employment and is trying his best to provide for his family. What should the social worker do first? So here we're looking at a social worker at a community health clinic. What are we doing? Completing an intake. Who is our client? A father and 2 children. Father reports they are currently living in a home that has mold. Is the first symptomology that we would look at. More recently, his 2 children have been coughing and feeling sick. Is important, as well as the father does not have employment and is trying his best to provide for the family. So that's a consideration we need to keep in mind. So first, again, whenever you see the word first, it should jump and slap you in the brain and say, this may be an application or application reasoning. So here we're looking at an application as well as reasoning because we're trying to come up with a possible solution to this father and children's issues. However, we're also using social work terms and practices to gather us to that answer. So with that, join with the father and acknowledge the difficulty of his current situation. Arrange for the father and his children to find more adequate housing. Assist the father with finding employment. Or refer the father and his children to a doctor. So having the knowledge of the acronym, join with the father and acknowledge the difficulties. So acknowledge the difficulty would be getting his subjective or recognizing his subjective view of the situation. So this one would be more of a feelings option. Arrange for the father and his children to find more adequate housing. So since we're arranging it, it looks like it's going to be more of an advocate because we're providing them the type of resources and they're ultimately going to be the ones that do the action. Assist the father with finding employment, since we're actually helping him get employment and or the job we're doing an action again. So keep in mind the word assist as well as the word arrange for the advocate. So arranging something for a client is advocate, and then assisting, so we're doing an actual action of it with something, so that's an intervene. So refer the father and his children to a doctor. So this is where it's kind of tricky. However, this would be a safety / refer, since anything that's handling medical and or abuse or neglect type situations, we need to be looking for the safety within it. Even though it all on its face says refer, we need to keep in mind that there's a doctor involved, as well as we're keeping refer within it. So you can have hybrid acronym applications, which makes this acronym super usable. So with this, helping the father find employment wouldn't be the first thing we'd want to do, because it's not going to change his housing environment, as well as the fact that the children and him have been feeling sick. So getting him and the children different housing wouldn't be the first thing that you'd want to do, because at the end of the day, getting them a different house isn't going to address the fact that they're already sick and coughing. So that would not be the first thing that we'd want to do. Doesn't mean that we wouldn't do it later down the road. However, it's not the best possible option. So that begs the question of, do we want to acknowledge the father's feelings, or do we want to get them to a doc and then acknowledge the feelings here? So here we'd want to rule out feelings, even though it's enticing and we often want to validate the clients before we proceed with anything. The safety as well as their sickness kind of overrides any possible needs that we would want to address first. So in this situation, you would want to refer them to a doctor, and then after we get their medical prognosis and status, then we can acknowledge the feelings and then help them get employment as well as housing. But keep in mind that you have to be looking at key details. So the safety is the most important here, because they've been feeling sick and coughing. So that is what drove us to the fact that we need to assess the safety first. So that is all that I have for you guys today. So I want to thank you guys again so much for the support that you guys show. It's humbling to me to know that I started making videos and tutoring people, and now that it's grown to interest where people are reaching out to capacities that I can barely get everything around. So I offer private tutoring. Again, just send me an email. I'm doing the study group this Sunday on the 18th at 7 p.m. and it's walking you guys through what each level of the acronym that I utilize, the SFAREAFI, as well as helping you do what I do in these videos of breaking down the questions as well as analyzing them and categorizing them to best walk and build your confidence around taking the exam. As usual, comment any feedback around the questions or any questions that you have in particular towards me. Did you like the video? Did you not like the video? Thumbs up the video so that way more people get involved and see that the video exists. The more likes it gets, the more exposure it gets, and the bigger our community grows and the more insight we can get within that. And if you're not already subscribed, just click the subscribe button, and it helps you out because it gives you email notifications every time I stream, upload a video, ask a question specifically to you guys. And thank you guys so much for the support, and have a wonderful week, and keep empowering people to become the best versions of themselves, because when we do that, guys, we ultimately become the best versions of ourselves. Thank you guys, and take care, guys.